As you know, this is our 15th week of doing these presentations. And again, I want to thank especially Jamie and Jason and Sandy and Robert. I mean, so many people coming in all the time. Mary and Anya. I really do appreciate you guys being so dedicated to being here. So thank you. And anyone else that I've forgotten. Um, Tonight we have Ira Lupa and Chris Ochian, who Chris and I recorded previously, and Ira is going to go first. And I thank our sponsors, Photo Shelter, Pro Photo Daily, Epson, American Photography, all of them. And I see my friend Elena, who's going to be presenting on Thursday. She's in the room there too, so it's great to see her. So with that, Ira, it's all yours. Share your screen, and off we go.
Yeah, thank you so much, Frank, for this introduction. And before I start presenting, I just want to thank you all guys for showing up. And throughout the whole 3 years of war, I keep repeating that with all the pain, enormous loss, and everything else that it brought into every Ukrainian's life. I also, me and like a lot of fellow Ukrainians, we grew to appreciate the amount of support and even attention that we get. And I really appreciate that in this time when there's obviously war fatigue, you still show up and don't feel um, like aboard Ukraine is a turnoff for you. But also this for us, the image makers, it establishes some new things we have to think about and fix and try new things in our work. And I'll be talking about that more now. So I'm gonna share my screen. Mhm. So today I want to present my latest project that I worked on. I started working on it in like 2023, but most of it I did in 2024, like this summer and just 1 month in fall. So it was also very quick, very emotional, very intuitive work in many ways. And first, I want to talk a bit about my thinking. So a little bit of my background. I'm Ukrainian, but I've been living in the US for the last 6 years. I got here because I was invited to study at the International Center of Photography. Never been intending in my life to become an immigrant, but you know how things go. Um, and at this point, I split my time between Ukraine and New York City, where I'm based. So I spent, I would say, 60% of my time, or sometimes 70, in the US, and the rest of my time in Ukraine. And war didn't change that. I actually started going back even more. But this experience of being since February 24 in the year 2022, which on that day I was here in my apartment in New York, so I was not in Ukraine. That was a moment when um, I also became an insider and outsider of looking at things that are happening to my country, right? So at times I would experience them from the inside, at times I would be experiencing them from the distance, also the beginning of the war. And of course, with the amount of photographers who went to Ukraine to document all of what is happening, it's been also this, circuit of observation, of witnessing. And I'll try to keep this part short and then like show the photographs. But it's important to mention that at first I didn't even expect that I'm going to be taking any pictures, that I'm going to be um, looking at the suffering of something and destruction as something that is a huge part of myself. I didn't even know how I can approach that visually. But after my first visit during the war, which was in April 2022, I had to go back there to Odessa, which is where I'm from, which was under a really serious threat of occupation back there. My grandma died, so I had to come back and, attend her funeral, which was my first time entering the war zone. Um, and it was really short, but when I left, I felt like my relationship with my country is now in a weird place because what I've seen was my country, but it was also something very new and that would probably take me some time to digest and live through. So I decided to come back in July for a longer time. And I took my camera with me just in case. But then I also had serious doubts if I even want to photograph anything in there. If to me it almost felt like observing a corpse of your loved one or something like that. But instantly when I crossed the border and when I, felt the scorching sun of Bessarabia, which is like the southern part of Ukraine where I'm from, this sense of normality which was still there, people laughing because also when you learn about what war is, you learn that so many things about war are not visual. And this is also something that informs my visual work now very seriously. And I think I was even telling this in first presentation with Frank 2 years ago, that instantly when I crossed the border, I took maybe like 2 rolls of film in 15 minutes. So something was happening. And coming back to the project that I'm going to be presenting now, um, later on and to that day, because unfortunately the war is not ending and we entered our 4th year of it. And of course, an immense amount of imagery was produced. And when I was doing my own photographs, because at first I was even unsure what I'm going to be looking at, like the destroyed buildings, the faces in pain, like I was going to war zones as well as I was working like far away from the front line. Um, but sometimes I would photograph a crumbled building, like destroyed by like as it was in Sumi, like a very direct and planned missile strike, and I would feel like something doesn't sit well with me with such photographs. And later on, I realized is that this is partially because to me, this is not entirely what war is for me. I feel it's very important that war crime documentation is existing, that the more classic news reportage, photojournalistic work does exist. But I felt like to me, a lot of this imagery falls into the very limited visual vocabulary of war or any conflict at all. While once again, war to me was something much more personal. So I would quote here an amazing Ukrainian scholar, Katerina Yakovlenko. Google image search results about the war show mostly professional images taken by photojournalists for their agencies. These are no poor images. There are no drone visuals, thermal imaging, no phone images of horrors. This presents a very different picture of the war than the one I will remember. So it was not only me feeling that. And I think for every Ukrainian, there is also this aspect that every time you look at the photograph, the documentation of every atrocity that happened in our country, it becomes more than just the depiction of the fact of this happening. It's the embodiment of some extremely heavy knowledge that we carry. Um, yeah, so Spovid, to me, when I was starting off this project, which is translated from Ukrainian Confession, I was thinking a lot about this collective trauma, about the invisible traumas, about these unspeakable things which are so tangible, palpable in the air when you enter the country, but which you would never see and feel like from any media outlet. And so I set myself an interesting, probably somewhat weird goal of trying to depict something that is undepictable through photographs and to look and for something and probably try to find something that is stored there, as Natalia Rivko, an amazing writer who I worked with for an article that is going to be published soon in Osmos magazine, that is stored on the margins of the body, right? This, as she says, archive of effects, this emotional something that is in there. And this also felt important because I think in the beginning, for many photographers working and documenting this war, it was more about observation of what happened to us and trying to understand. And now in the fourth year, we're coming even deeper into this understanding and trying like attempt to understand of what actually have happened to us, how we're gonna live with it, like what is the depth of trauma, what are also the nice things that war has brought, because weirdly enough, there are also some elements that are enlightening. And as I say oftentimes, that I wish war never happened, but I also don't want to be the person that I've been before it all started. Um, oh, somehow I can't. Okay, now I can go through the photographs. Yeah, I'll probably just look through them a bit so you
So,
get a taste.
I mean,
Yeah.
as you start your presentation, this
Hmm.
is a I mean, it's a very emotional journey for you,
Oh, absolutely. I
right?
don't remember how I took part of these pictures, honestly.
Huh.
Yeah.
And how does that play into when you're going out to shoot? I mean, like what's in your head as you come upon a scene, an image, how do you think about that?
I think with this project specifically, because it was the project, um, because I think like the first year of me photographing was very different. It was also very different time. But these photographs are very intuitive. Many of them are very, as I also said in one of the interviews, like I photograph through the body. So it's almost like this instinctive gut reaction that I have to the photograph or the scene that is being photographed. And this also explains the nature of the photographs that I have in this project, because some of them are, documentary photographs of something that I want to photograph deliberately, some situation or some group of people, but it's also visual diaries. So some photographs I take on like medium format camera, but some I take on like toy camera, those disposable little cameras, or like on smaller 35 millimeter cameras. So something very like um Henri Cartier-Bresson, like the split second of something. Yeah, so very, very intuitive in many ways.
And you're by yourself when you're shooting?
Sorry?
You're by yourself when you're shooting.
It would depend. I prefer to be by myself, but in many cases, in the photographs that I'm showing today, I was in groups of friends. I think the friend circle was also very important for this work, and this is also one of the most personal projects that I ever did. Um, Partially because I think the focus of this project, so I don't think of this project as like youth related project, but the main group of people that I've been focusing on are 18 to 35 years old, so like relatively my age, people who don't have families, who live like more, free lifestyle. Um, so this is the group of people I focused on, and of course, many of them are in my immediate surroundings. For example,
Everything
like
shot
this.
on film?
Yes, it's entirely shot on film, and you'll see some bright orange photographs that are also shot on film, and I'll talk later about my thinking about including these photographs. I know normally they attract a lot of attention, so we'll take time to talk about them too. And in this photograph, for example, her name is Ksenia. She's 18 years old, so very young. She's from Zaporizhia, a part of Ukraine which is very close to the front line. I'll talk about Zaporizhia in one of the photographs later. So a city which has also very important historical meaning for the country. In many ways, it carries almost like this Ukraine spirit, because Ukrainian Cossacks used to have one of their foreposts in there. But here she's photographed outside of her town because she's one of those like internally displaced refugees. Because, there are refugees who went to other countries, but there are refugees who just changed their place of living and within the country. And she's an art student, just a regular girl. And here we photographed. Basically, I took her and a couple of other younger people who are not in the army, who are just youngsters, students, artists, to the ravens of Vasilkiv. It's a region, it's in Kiev region, so very close to Kiev, but it's also known for having one of the biggest military aircraft airports. So it's getting shelled almost every day. It's very loud there in the nights. It's also where many of the drones fly in on their way to Kiev, so it's even more loud in the nights than in Kiev. So also the space, uh, looking at this photograph, you would never be able to tell probably anything of that, right? It also almost looks like some Southern American Gothic, but the context is what it makes it different. And so this is also part of me thinking about how we rely on instant reading of the photographs, but photographs can actually be pretty misleading and they can't be full truth, but also sometimes they can carry this energetic matter that explains even more than a more outright and direct photograph does. So this is this like dilemma and interesting thing about photography. Um, yeah, this was one of the first. This was not the first photograph that I took, but was an important mystical moment to me. I've been very immersed in my dream life recently. Um, I've learned a lot about how dreams function and how they can influence our everyday lives. But interestingly, I had a dream in November 2022 about that was the time when the deoccupation of Kherson region, like the southern region, happened. So Ukrainians were able to, they managed to liberate a very important part of Ukraine. And during that time, I had this very surreal dream where I found myself in little village. And I remembered its name, Snihurivka, which I've never heard. Maybe I've heard somewhere, but I did not remember myself knowing what this place is. And in my dream, it was a Russian town, and it was populated by Russians who were very surreal. In my dream, they were wearing these, carnivalesque masks. They were looking like absurd, like frogs with like this fairy tale, really surreal makeup. And I would ask them where the bus stop is, and they were not able to respond to this like very simple question. So there was this sense of absurdity in this dream. And when I woke up, I learned that this part of Ukraine was liberated, and Snihurivka, which I dreamt about, was part of this deoccupied area. So now it got back to Ukraine. And I took this photograph this summer when I was actually going to Kherson region to photograph one of my friends who was now in the military, like a regular civilian in his previous life. And I stumbled upon this sign, which still had, the name of Snihurivka painted over. But I did not expect that I would ever, find myself in there. So I think it also is very much about this almost magical thinking that you develop when your body is in this very unusual chemical state when you're in the war zone, when you're experiencing war, and when all of the things known and unknown blend, and you're just in all of that.
And Ira,
Yeah.
when you're taking these photographs and you have a subject in the photographs, are you sharing with them where your mental state is so they can come along on your journey, or how does that work?
Interestingly, thank you for this question. Um, as I told, I don't remember like half of the like moments I took these photographs. Like I remember the situations, but because they were so intuitive to me, I didn't give much thought to them. And I think it was with the whole project in the beginning. So I wasn't really sure. I know what I'm interested in. I know this energetic matter that was I was looking for, but I wasn't really sure what are going to be the exact moments where I'll be able to extract this invisible something from that moment. So I was not really sharing with people about that. And some of the situations you'll see later are like very everyday, mundane situations. But I definitely did get to talk to many of them after I wrapped up the project. And honestly, even though I finalized this project just because it instantly went on exhibitions, which I'm also going to tell you about back in October, I feel that the full realization of what I did reached me just pretty recently, when I've been in New York for the last five, even more months, and I was in this like artistic environment of photographers, image makers talking about what I did. And I think that's when I finally realized what I did. Yeah.
Because as we watch them, it's interesting to think what came first, the chicken or the egg, as it relates to this image or the previous or the next image,
Hmm.
that you've come upon this, and does this inspire something, mentally that takes you to another place where you're in an art environment in your brain?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it was definitely both because I was coming into making this project with some notions about what I'm interested in, but definitely a lot of things were opening up. But I think even photojournalists who work in a more direct way, oftentimes that's also why they keep doing this work because they learn many things about the work itself and the world and something even about themselves in the course of working. And this is also very beautiful and at times eerie thing about photography, I think, is how it ages and how it opens up with time and with your growth, with the growth of your audience. And these things are almost unpredictable. Yeah. So this photograph is actually also very precious to me because this is me in, I was driving around on a motorcycle with my friend who I mentioned when showing the previous photograph around Kherson region, pre-front line area. So it's already basically a military area. You can get there like unless you have a military pass. It is still dangerous. It's some parts of it are mined. There are while you drive through it, you see, those pillars of fumes from artillery strikes by Russians, right? Because they still shoot in this. There are some villages and people living there. They still trying to hit some targets. But this was also mid-July, so I'm not sure if that field was burning because of the artillery strike, or because it was really hot and maybe the field was just burning, or that was the season for the farmers who are still there collecting wheat to burn the field. But I was really interested in the storks on the field, which were just standing there um, like in this final scene in this movie Fight Club, if you remember, there's this beautiful closing scene where Edward Norton and Marla are just standing there watching the buildings crumbling. And the storks that I saw, like there was a pair of storks, were just watching this burning field, in this like very dystopian manner. So I asked my friend Alexei to stop the bike, and I went to like really close to this edge of fire to photograph it. But suddenly, like the storks went away, so I wasn't even able to photograph them anymore. But I always had this dream of witnessing a tornado in my life. I even when I was in the US, I would be like, oh, maybe I go like tornado hunting, this like very weird, random dream that I had. And suddenly, just in a couple of feet from me, the fumes started forming a whirlwind, which is really as close as it could get to tornado in Ukraine, and it was literally just a few steps from me. So what you see there, and I think I'll have one more photograph of that in this presentation. In there is actually a pillar of smoke, so it was this like smoke devil forming, and suddenly my old dream came true in the middle of nowhere in this frontline area. It was one of the most mystical moments of my life.
And how did you get the orange tone?
So yeah, this is finally this question. So this is a very specific film that I was using. So this is not Photoshop or anything. This is a red scale film. I think it does exist on American market as well. So it's a known technique, but I used a specific brighter red scale film that is being produced in Ukraine. And the idea of this film, like the technique of this film, is that the red layer of the red layer is being like turned inside out, so it's like a negative essentially being turned inside out. So the red layer is getting exposed first, not last, like it normally is. So basically, yeah, this is like very interesting analog technique. But to me, apart from giving this very stark visual effect, it was also about this inversion that I also feel is a very important part of the project, right? Where the inside becomes outside, and me trying to convey these things which are internal or are internal not in only in just physical sense but internal even in this like Ukrainian matter, right? Like a way of in this Ukrainian sense, right? The things that are really hard to comprehend unless you're in a conflict situation and you know how big of like emotional and existential roller coaster all of that is, this
Yeah.
collective grieving and all of that. Yeah.
So, Ira, from that standpoint, that day that you went out, did you
Hmm.
go out with that film
Hmm.
because you were in that sort of state of mind, or did the circumstance come and let me put this film in?
Yeah, I'm laughing because I wasn't really, I didn't know what I'm doing at all with this film. I really bought it just to experiment.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I would use it as a backup film. And I honestly, I just shot maybe two or three, 2.5 36 frame rolls. So not that huge amount, right? For this amount of time that I spent in Ukraine working on this project. And later on, I found out that this film really works better in some specific sceneries, right? In some situations with a lot of light, with a lot of sunlight. Sometimes I would even like face it. So I think even the way I approached this film was also very intuitive, but also very conscious at the same time. I know it's like a bit, um, yeah, it's like I'm saying opposite things one at a time, but that really how it was. And here in this photograph, it to me it became so as I told that I was also focusing on apart from my own experiences and my own visual diary, I was also focusing on these different groups of younger people in Ukraine. And if the first group that I showed you in the first photograph, and we'll see more of that group, like my more immediate circle of friends, of people in my bubble, I also got to work with people like this person who I would never have met in my regular Ukrainian life pre-war. So this guy and a couple of other guys in the next photographs is a prisoner, an ex-prisoner who was released on parole because he volunteered to go fight, right? So this thing we saw happening in Russia with Wagner mercenary unit, right? So like a lot of prisoners actually were used as cannon fodder from Russian side. On the Ukrainian side, of course, it's also like a consequence of lack of people because we're a much smaller country, and we're fighting against a giant with probably infinite physical resource of people, and also like it's also the best of our people are mostly going to this war and dying there, unfortunately, while Russia can just send like whoever they want to send, and there will be still a lot of people. So Ukraine also faced this problem, and that's why we started taking like as an experiment at first, which as far as I know is pretty successful experiment at this point, trying to carefully select prisoners who volunteer to go fight for Ukraine. When I got this opportunity to go to the front line and work with this group of ex-convicts, I didn't really know what I can expect from this experience. And once again, I didn't really know if that's gonna be part of my story and my project because, it's really unpredictable, such things. But in the end, it turned out to be one of the most impressive, I would not even say photographic experiences, but even human experiences in my life. So this guy in this photograph, his call sign is Little Boxer. And after I took his photographs, he gave me a notebook and he scribbled his mom's email. He asked to send the photographs to his mom. This guy in this photograph has a very unique story. His like a little um, superstar of the unit because his call sign is Lam, which is a slang word for 1 million in Ukrainian. And he got imprisoned because at the age of 21, he stole $3 million from a Ukrainian bank, from a big and pretty popular Ukrainian bank. And then he went to Europe. He bought himself a European passport, and he spent, this is all pre-war, of course. He spent 1 year traveling and living lavish life in Monaco. And he himself is a very like simple guy from Donetsk, like this city that has been occupied since the first part of this war, which started in 2014. So he himself knew what displacement and occupation is. And then he was like, oh, probably just got bored, didn't really know what to do with this amount of money at his age. And he decided to go back to Ukraine, and he got detained, got imprisoned. And in the end, he decided to go fight. And one of the things which was probably also surprising to me is that most of these guys, and I felt like this was really genuine, they really wanted to fight, they really were motivated. One of the guys who unfortunately was killed in action pretty soon after the photographs were taken. We'll see him later in the photographs. He was left like with like 5 months of his sentence in the prison. So, why not, just spend this time there and then, take your time to not go fight, right? But he was like, to hell with living like that, and I really want to fight for my country. He's also from the city, Chasiv Yar, which is now was carpet bombed like many, many times and is now practically non-existent. And he really wanted to, um, protect his relatives. And then, when I entered this situation of me, I'll show more of them here. It's so two of these guys here are killed in action after this photograph was taken. And at least three of them were injured, two of them heavily injured. Fortunately, they're alive. But I was also taking these photographs in, so this is an assault brigade, right? So these are the guys who do the most complicated work on the front line. They go physically into this infantry, very serious, very direct fight, right? So it's
Are
very,
these prisoners? Well, are these former
all
prisoners?
of these are former prisoners,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, all of them. Um, so so their work is really one of the most risky ones you can do on the front line, right? And I took their photographs in their last day off after they went through a course of trainings. So they were still fresh and maybe a little naive. They were like, yeah, we're gonna fight and like kick their asses. And they had their first mission on the next day, and they were like getting ready and uh, you know getting really serious, but also they were so close when I started, because before I would start taking the photographs, I had like little interviews with them. And some of them were really close as people, they were gruff and like saying like, we're not gonna share anything private and personal. In 5 minutes, all of them would start share everything as personal as it could get. Some of them would start crying. Most of them would start sharing their dreams. I imagine that was for many of them the first time in their life anyone would ever listen to them. And then as a gesture of recognition and maybe some sort of thankfulness to me, they would bring energetic drinks and chocolate, which is a very prized currency on the front line. And then this moment of me taking their pictures in this field was very important because they felt suddenly, finally at ease. They would play like little boys. So that was a really, really beautiful moment of human connection despite all the stereotypes and even despite this weird dichotomy of a villain, because did they did wrong in their life, right? They Some of them are thieves, some of them beat someone up. The tallest guy on the right, actually got crazy sentence of for 9 years just because he carried like a pretty small amount of drugs on him. So also stories like that.
Have these guys all been trained?
By the moment, that when I took this photograph, they all went through training, yeah. And they were carefully selected and went through a lot of training before they were sent to their first fight, which unfortunately not all of them survived. So this guy, Chasik from Chasiv Yar, who I was telling you about previously, he's the one who you see like with his face turning right. He was almost like a caricature thief, like big part of prison culture, but he was also so motivated and he became the leader, like the natural leader of this company. And he was the first one to die. He died from a direct tank shot. So honestly, also one of the most terrible death you can have. He burned to death in just split seconds. So, it's very black and white and also no color or all colors together because, yeah, once again, he's a villain, but he's also a hero. And I would say when many Ukrainians are not really comfortable with this part of what we're going through, but it also felt important. Yeah, so moments like that.
Mm.
Um, I also want to talk a bit about this photograph because it's another example of the photograph that looks beautiful, just young girls playing in the water. Probably it looks timeless. I Vogue Ukraine's editor-in-chief really liked this photograph, so because it has this almost like not really fashion sensibility, but something that so you would never say that this is a photograph of something that is happening during a wartime, but even more to that. So this photograph I took, this is one of the photographs that I took earlier in 2023. It was the beginning of July. It's in Zaporizhia once again. And you might know that very close to Zaporizhia, a Zaporizhia nuclear station, nuclear plant is situated. It's, I think, one of, if not the biggest nuclear plant in Europe, and it's now under Russian occupation. And in July 2023, there was a real moment when our intelligence was reporting that Russians have placed explosives on parts of this nuclear plant and that they want to do some kind of provocation or false flag operation or just blatantly, just blow the thing up. So whole country at this point, when I was there in Zaporizhia, and I had to make this conscious, crazy decision whether I'm gonna go so close to a potential second Chernobyl or not. So the whole country was really anxious at this point. People were buying out those iodine pills, which are believed to protect you from the radiation. So this is all happening 2 hours drive from that nuclear plant on Ukrainian side. You can also, it's like the center of Zaporizhia. These girls are beach volleyball players, like athletes. They were playing volleyball on the shore of Dnieper River in the center of the city. They were just happy having their time, regardless of whatever was happening in the news and what was in the air. Also, the river was half dried out because of the Kakhovka Dam explosion, which happened a month ago and which affected the Ukrainian ecological system in a very bad way. It was practically an ecocide that the Russians have committed consciously. So, and I think the effects of this will stay with Ukraine for decades to come. But because of that, the Dnieper River dried out and it exposed the shells, as if the current war was not enough, it exposed the shells from Second World War. And
Mm.
soon after I took these photographs, a policeman approached me and he was like, "Get the fuck out of here because we just found a shell on this shore that is unexploded, like the salt shell. So we're now like we're gonna demine it now." And also the artillery rounds from the front line were heard at this moment when I was taking this photograph. So once again, this counterintuitive, surreal moment about um, conflict photography is that peaceful life does exist even under such circumstances, but it doesn't mean that this life is really peaceful in its entirety and that things are visual, right? I've seen this happening to with the war in Gaza as well. Like, people showing photographs from the beach, like of like Palestinians taking a swim and saying like, look, there is like no war happening because, you know, they're swimming and having a good time. But I, as a Ukrainian, I know exactly what is happening, that it actually doesn't mean anything. So this visual dilemma that is interesting to explore, but also probably something that people should be mindful of when they look at any photograph from anywhere in the world. And also, I used it as a photographer as a way to speak about things which are unspeakable. So pretty, I think, somewhat experimental approach, but it is what it is. Yeah, let's see what we have here. It was my first time encountering a real tank, and I called it in my thoughts a loud beast because this is the loudest, craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. And you, like the guts, the visceral reaction you have to this machine is just unexplainable. But interestingly about this word, this is not about photography, that tanks are mostly used as artillery these days. So there is no like classic tank fight as it used to be in previous world conflicts before. Yeah, this photograph also is very representative of the state of my state and state of affairs with every Ukrainian, because you see my finger in the corner in there, and I deliberately didn't crop it out because this was also one of the photographs that was taken on this toy disposable Tri-X Kodak Tri-X camera, and you can really sometimes can just can't control what is in the frame. And you know, everything else in this photograph I think is pretty straightforward because sunflowers are one of the symbols of Ukraine, and this is a pretty sad withering sunflower field also in Kherson region. This motherhood scene on Desna River. Another photograph from Vasilkiv from the kids and the artists. This was a couple which was very inspirational to work with. They were so in love, and so they were just infecting everyone around them with their love energy. Um, so originally, I started this project as part of bigger collaborative project that Magnum Photos, together with Odessa Photo Days, a great Ukrainian photo festival that does wonders during the sport time, initiated. Um, so the idea of that project was to bring together photographers from Ukraine. There were three photographers except for me, like more seasoned, established, famous, I would say, Magnum photographers who worked in Ukraine or did not work in Ukraine, and four photographers from four countries such as Cambodia, Mexico, Kazakhstan, and one more country, Mexico, Kazakhstan, Cambodia, and Nigeria. So the idea was to bring photographers from all these countries and to try, even though the focus of the project was still on Ukraine, but to try to look for things which could be bridges for all of us to talk about our shared dilemmas, shared traumas, shared experiences. So there were projects around occupation. Daria Stratilova, who also presented with Frank previously, she did a project about abduction of children. And I was working with the topic of fight and adaptation. So this is the final installation in one of the four exhibitions, and hopefully it will reach the US at some point too, and which is now on view in Lviv. And I'm gonna go there soon and present together with Anton Degata and yeah, a lot of community events as well. So the way I approached and curator Katerina Radchenko, who helped me with making this project, was I really wanted to build this more simple in a way that is unframed photographs, right? They're very raw. Many of these photographs probably would not work as single images. They really work as this, once again, wall of energy and this communal collage that is also representative of communal experiences and something more like very personal, but also very collective. And one of my friends who was looking at this layout, he even said that this looks like a shell that exploded and spread all of that. And you see here how the orange photographs or like red photographs started playing as like those little energetic sparks. And I normally say that I leave the reading of for the viewer of like what associations, like what comes to his mind when he looks at images that are so red and so bright. To someone is like fire, probably the first thing that comes to your mind. Someone told me that for them it's reminiscent of the scorching sun in southern Ukrainian steppes. So things like that. Um,
So when you put a presentation like that up,
mhm,
do you feel that you need to have an explanation of what we're looking at, or do you let the viewer, to your point, what you were just saying,
mhm.
come up with what they think it is?
I think it's once again a mixture. So I leave some of the, and it's almost like always like that with photography, like, right? You leave your viewer with the opportunity to react instinctively and read the photograph and the layout the way he or she or they would read it. But also for that matter of probably providing more context when needed, I also included an audio essay of myself talking about the project, like a little more. Um, I wouldn't say it's poetic, but it certainly has this like dreamy element to it as well, this text. Yeah, so the viewers would be able to just listen to it if they want to and learn more about what it actually all is about. And I haven't seen this exhibition yet in real life, but one of the curator friends was there at the opening, and she said there was a group of people looking at this display of yours and at other displays, but what she told me happened right there. And they were Ukrainians, which was also the first time for me showing this project to Ukrainians because I already presented it in the US and Cambodia, in Kazakhstan, in Mexico, but not to people who actually know what the photographs are really about, right? Which was, you know, you don't know what to expect from that encounter. And this guy, she overheard him saying to one of, after he listened to the audio, and he told like, his friends that I'm happy I'm with you here, guys, because I'm about to like, if I were not with you here today, I would probably just like burst out like crying and just black out. Which also, honestly, I'll be honest with you, made me think if that's what I want to do as a photographer. Like, I don't really want to re-traumatize people, and I think this project is, is done. And now that I'll go to Ukraine this summer, I will also find ways to make photography, which probably would be healing and
So, so
probably.
you, so
Mhm,
you say that, so you say that probably make photographs that are healing.
mhm.
Does that lend itself to before you get there thinking what I want to photograph? Or is it as I'm taking the photographs that represents healing? Which comes first for you?
I think second would be more correct in my case. Maybe also because I myself feel more healed than I ever, even though, the atrocities still happened just last week. A very close friend of my close friends has was killed in action on the front line, and she was just an artist my age, just a girl like myself who was a civilian who never wanted to become a military person. So, and that was very, even though I didn't know her in person, that was a very personal and shocking loss. Despite all of that, I also found a way for myself to heal. And it's not about just being on a distance. Honestly, at times it feels even, less physically dangerous. But also, New York, it's always physically dangerous as well. But also like almost harder to be in the US at this time. So probably when I would approach my subjects or the situations I will photograph, I will also carry some of that healing energy in me, but and maybe some of it we would manifest together and it would speak through the photographs, I feel like, because this is pretty similar to what have happened with this project. And
And
also,
will
you
the
know, it's just my intention. I don't know if I'll be able to do this. Maybe it's going to be just another um, trauma-related project. We'll see.
will you convey what you're thinking and feeling to your subjects?
I think this time I will. And thank you for asking because it makes me think and plan in advance.
Uh,
I think this time I will talk to them about ways. Um, I would say this healing and coming back to us talking about political climate, right? I think it was much harder, from what I can tell, for many Ukrainians. It's very insulting, it's very unjust, it's very diminishing, it's very disrespectful, everything we hear from President Trump these days. It's almost hard to wrap your head around. I don't know if you're going to include this in the recording, but I really want to repeat the fact that we had a missile strike on the civilian area in the center of Sumy um, a few days ago when 30 people died. And Trump commented this very outright and very direct attack on civilians just by saying that was a mistake and Russians made a mistake. But we Ukrainians, we learned in the course of this couple of years that such strikes are not a mistake and they do them deliberately. Even if they did it for mistake a couple of times, you know, we still target civilian area and you know what you're doing and you know that you're going to massacre a lot of people by sending Iskander ballistic missiles in there, one of the most destructive. Um, oh, I lost my train of thought in here. Sorry, what I was
No,
saying.
no, that you were saying that we should make sure to keep that comment
Oh,
inside.
yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I wanted to continue my thought about that together with all this ugliness of what we have to experience right now, just listening to all of that, right? After our 4 years of three and a half, like 3 and something years of fighting, I feel also like we it's almost a bit easier to be in this moment when things are happening and when something is happening, even if it's as ugly as it is politically, than the last year and a half when we were in complete vacuum with like almost no coverage. Many people here in Europe were asking like, oh, if this is still going on while people were like dying every day. So psychologically, it was very hard to be in this space of not knowing when it's going to end, and we still don't know when it's going to end, but at least we feel like we switched to like next stage.
Yeah.
So Ukrainians are drained, are fatigued, they're struggling, but I also feel like probably this anger has released some resources, you know, some hidden resources. So that's probably how human psyche works. Yeah, some of these different display in Mexico City and here. Yeah.
So thank you so much. So I think you said you were going back in June,
Yes, I'm in Ukraine June 1st, even a couple of days earlier than that. Yeah.
and when you get there, you'll have a fixer, or do you go on your own? Like, what's your plan of attack?
Uh, Maybe I would use Fixer once or twice, but I worked with Fixer for the ex-prisoner story, but also it's hard to call him a fixer because he's my really close friend, and we were doing this as a collective little thing, and he also was willing to, you know, do something more artistic rather than, you know, just helping people produce reportages. So probably I would work again with him, which would be more of a friendly experience. But most of the time, like when I went to Kherson region, I went there completely alone. I drew into the pre-frontline area on my own car, which honestly also felt a little crazy doing that. But also, yeah, I was my own fixer. Then I think I'll use a combination of different things, and I would not only focus on a front line because I also feel like you don't necessarily have to be on a front line, and even in Ukraine, in order to produce something related to Ukraine, which would speak with all of the um, yeah, with it's the whole entirety of soul to Ukraine, if you know what I mean. For
Yeah,
example, I'm going to this residency right now in Catskills in upstate New York before I go to Ukraine. So obviously, I would not have any access to like making new work about, something that I can just like guide my lens towards something that is Ukrainian, but I would still make work that visual photographic work that I'm pretty sure would be related to Ukrainian this or that way. It's also maybe unfortunate for an artist, for every person. You don't even have to be an artist that these days you have to become so absorbed by all matters related to your country, and you become your country. You die
mhm,
for your country, like many brave people in our country do. This is probably a privilege to not be conscious of a citizen of what country you are at some point of your life. But this is what it also is until the war ends, and probably until the end of my life. This will also, everything I will do will revolve around that or very close to what we are experiencing right now. This is just the nature of it.
yeah. Well,
It would take a lifetime to, yeah, to wrap our heads around all of that.
yeah, I think yeah, it's a long journey, a
It
very, very
definitely is.
So I thank you, so much for doing this. I know you've been very busy and having, numbers of issues. You should check in the chat room. A lot of beautiful comments of
Oh, yes, please.
of your presentation. If anyone has any questions, you could put it into the chat room, or you can raise your hand and we'll get a question in. If not, then we'll move on with Chris. But Ira, I thank you so much for doing this. And as you know, you have a platform to be with us anytime you have work, and you know, irregardless of the subject matter, we always want you to come back. And everyone should also know that this presentation will probably be up Wednesday or Thursday of next week, something like that on our YouTube channel and on our website. Um, so, Era, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you so much for taking an hour of your life to listen to all of that. I feel incredibly humbled to everyone who's still in this room, and thank you for your beautiful comments. And I hope next time I'll show you something healing.
Well, that we're looking forward to it because we could all use that in many different ways.
Yeah, thank you
So,
so much. And Patricia writes in the chat about spending time in nearby Moldova and falling in love with the people. Actually, my last name is Moldovan. I have some Moldovan heritage, so that tells I'm a very Odessa mixture of a Ukrainian. And yeah, this country has also been very supportive as a neighbor in types of the crisis, and I feel like there's like some shared mind space for us. So it's really nice that you got to go there. Yeah, I think the question about the orange film I did
yeah, I
respond
tried to weave that in the conversation from
to.
Jamie. Jamie always has a film question, or a technique question, or a camera question, which is great. Keeps us all
Nice.
keeps us all